How did the accidental discharge happen? What happened?
It was going, I was...
From you or somebody else?
I was trying to take out the magazine and it went off.
Alright, we'll get it figured out. Just stay calm for now. What happened upstairs?
Nothing happened upstairs.
Jermaine Bass, my client, did not shoot his children.
This was no accident, ladies and gentlemen. Not even close. This was a deliberate, intentional, premeditated act to kill those two children. Done by that man right there, Jermaine Bass.
Out 47, be advised, there's another gunshot victim upstairs. It's a juvenile female. You got nothing on you right now.
He's got something on the side of the head and his head.
Left side of his head. Alright, have a seat. You're good.
Hey, guys, get up. They're coming down now. When you have 4-year-old.
Where at?
The state's exhibit list, the evidence list, can we discuss that? I'm just going to go through and see what we can admit now and what needs to wait till the proper channels or witnesses or whatever from your record preservation standpoint. Number 1, 911 call.
No objection.
All right. 2, body worn camera of Rainey, R-A-N-N-E-Y.
When it comes to item number 2 through 5, the body-worn cameras from Rainey, White, Rahman, and Jones, the only objection is to preserve the motion to suppress, and that will be that there was no Miranda and he was being questioned and in custody.
All right.
Otherwise, I'm okay with the substance of it and all that and the body cams. I'll also need to apply that technically to their testimony as well.
All right. Then as to 2, 3, 4, and 5, those will be admitted over defense objection as it relates to the motion to suppress.
Thank you, Judge.
6, Rain video camera from Heritage Club Drive.
No objection.
Admitted. 7.
Just real quick on that one, I apologize. I wrote green video camera. It's just a camera. It's not actually a ring camera, but it's still a video camera of the surveillance.
7, video from Evans.
No objection.
8, poll camera video, Fletcher Avenue.
No objection.
Admitted. 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are shell casings.
No objection.
They'll all be received. 14, blankets and pillow.
No objection.
Received. 15, wallet from master dresser drawer.
No objection.
Received. 16, Glock 42 pistol from dresser drawer.
The sole objection to 16 would be that it is a potential fruit of the poisonous tree from the statements. So for that reason alone, I object.
All right, that'll be admitted over objection related to the motion to suppress.
Thank you.
17 and 18 projectiles.
No objection.
Received. 19 and 20 projectiles. Received. 21, cell site map.
No objection.
Received. 22, A through, what's that supposed to be?
Judge, we didn't complete that one yet because there's some photos that are part of what's the motion in limine from the defense that we haven't addressed yet. So I don't really have them labeled yet because I don't know what's going to be admitted from those photos.
All right. 23, A through J.
No objection.
Received. 24, A through L, L, double L.
No objection.
Received. 25, crime scene diagram.
No objection.
Received. 26, A and B, aerial map.
No objection.
Received. 27, A through D.
No objection.
Received. 28, A through E.
No objection.
Received. All right. And so there is a motion in limine outstanding.
There are 2. The state has 1, and I have 1.
All right. I have the state's motion for order in limine regarding 1, 2, and 3.
There'll be no objection from the defense with all 3.
All right. And that's granted by stipulation of the parties. Then let's just go one by one. Evidence or testimony regarding DV incidents between the defendant and Shirley Bass.
No objection, Your Honor.
One will be granted. 2, evidence or testimony regarding termination of parental rights of defendant or Shirley Bass.
Judge, we don't have an objection to that.
Granted. 3, DCF involvement with the defendant or Shirley Bass.
Again, we don't have any objection to that.
Granted. Testimony by law enforcement, defendant invoked his rights.
No objection, Judge.
Granted. 5, Hellcat firearm previously owned by the Basses.
I don't have an objection to that.
Granted. 6,
Judge, that one's kind of difficult for me. I don't really have an objection in the sense that I'm not going to ask the officers to run out of ammo, but I am going to point out to the fact and argue in closing that there is no more .380 ammo, that this was all there was, that there was no other ammunition that would fit that firearm, and everything, but he could not have fired that firearm anymore after he fired those 5 shots. So I intend to argue that. I don't intend to elicit any sort of opinion testimony from the detective or anybody else that he ran out of ammo or he would have kept firing or anything like that.
is that your concern?
My only concern was, in fact, yes, them giving their opinion, and I understand Mr. Cherry can argue anything in closing, that's not the issue, that he ran out of ammo because there wasn't any more. I will note a correction to the statement. I do believe there is an entire box of .380 ammo that is located in Mrs. Bass's purse in the kids' room, in the kids' closet.
All right.
Just to correct that point. However, yeah, that's the only thing. We just don't want to say, oh, we think you ran out of ammo, or that's all we're concerned.
All right.
All right, and I'll look into that, Judge. I didn't realize, I thought we had gone through and I didn't see any .380 ammo, but maybe there was something there.
All right. Then that's really granted in the way that it's presented in the motion.
Yeah.
All right. Testimony from H7. Shooting was not accidental, giving their opinion about the number of gunshot wounds and its effect on premeditation.
Yeah, their opinion testimony, Judge, I'm not going to listen.
All right, that's
Yeah, I
granted.
don't have a problem if they say they saw what appeared to be gunshot wounds. It was and its
A
effect.
large number of ammunition found in various places throughout the house, mostly in the master bedroom, though. Most of them do not, they're 9mm, they don't fit this firearm, but they are relevant, in my opinion, to show and explain to the jury this man had guns, he knows how to use guns, he had ammunition, because one of the allegations, or at least the defense initially, is that this is an accidental discharge. And the fact that he has so much ammunition from different types of firearms, in my opinion, would be something we could argue in closing to suggest that he definitely understood firearms, clearly has had other firearms with other types of ammunition, and therefore he should have the ability, he knows how to clean or pull out a magazine out of a firearm without discharging it.
Are there other types of guns as well, or just
No,
the
he had,
ammunition?
Apparently they were in financial distress around that time period, and he had pawned all his other firearms. So he had no other firearms in the house, but he did have ammunition for other firearms in the house.
And a lot of loose casings.
All right.
And a lot of loose casings
Spent
scattered
casings.
throughout. Not spent casings, but
Yeah, they're all
there were
spent.
some
Yeah,
spent,
they're spent.
but there were also some bullets in the,
All right. And what says the defense?
Yes, Judge, as I put in my motion, this only applies to the master bedroom. The gun, obviously, and anything related that could fit in that gun. Most of the stuff that is located is found in an Adidas bag, it's found in a backpack. There's one live round, I believe, a 9mm, that's right on top of the dresser. We just don't think they're relevant. Nothing that is in that bedroom, other than that firearm, had any involvement or could even be used in this case. A lot of it was spent casings, potentially, I guess, from Mr. and Mrs. Bass going to the gun range. You can see 9mm TUMO spent casings, NFCR spent casings. We had an ammo box of 9mm, the Luger live round on the top, and then some 9mm Luger live rounds in the dresser. None of those, a 9mm ammo cannot fit in a .380. So we just believe it's all irrelevant, it's going to confuse the jury, and nothing in that paragraph at all has any connection to the .380. So, and this
Make a
motion is
statement that it's
specifically limited
accidental
to
or
the
something?
Judge, he does.
He also has a concealed weapons permit that is in his wallet that's coming into evidence.
All right, then number 9 is denied. But with the caveat that there's no argument that he is some dangerous person because of the amount of ammunition and the types of ammunition that are found there. It's limited to what you've indicated to this court, that it
will
goes.
be limited to rebut the defense of an accident.
Correct. All right.
Judge, one thing I want to caveat, and I want to ask for a court ruling. I've already advised Mr. Terry of this. When Deputy Rainey testifies, and it's also clearly on his body cam, he exits back out of the residence at one point after he has only asked Mr. Bass what happened, and Mr. Bass says accidental discharge. After he steps out on his radio, he clearly says, house is clear, nobody else is in the house, and there's a second victim upstairs. He then walks back inside the house, and he gets into very detailed question. How did it happen? Who, where was everybody? All that. Obviously, we feel very strongly the motion to suppress should have been granted because Deputy Rainey specifically testified under oath in his depot at that point with those two things that he's saying before it even happens, he was definitely not free to leave. The court denied it. All due respect to Judge Fernandez, I'm not re-arguing here at this point, obviously, but I do think I want to just bring one or two questions in about that because it goes to the jury instruction about defendant's statements. However, I don't want to open the door to him later invoking. Because later on, when they do read Miranda, which we feel is way too late, he does invoke. They continue to ask a couple of questions. Judge Fernandez did clearly throw those out. So what I wanted to ask Rainey clearly was, like on your body cam, we hear you say the house is clear and there's 2 victims. And you can clearly hear the other officers also before any of the questioning. I just want to say at that point, he is not free to leave. And you are questioning him, and at that point, no Miranda's being read. That would be the extent of it. But I'm afraid I don't want to open the door to the invocation.
Yeah, Judge, and we would object to that. I mean, it was sufficiently litigated in the motion to suppress. I believe the record has been preserved in that. All of what she testified to, he testified to in the motion to suppress.
He didn't testify.
No, he didn't.
Well, she relied on the body cams
Yes.
and the depositions of Rahman and Rainey. I just want to clarify, John. I didn't mean to correct you.
But it's we don't think that. I believe that will potentially create an issue, potentially open a door for Miranda. I have not advised Deputy Rainey about this at all yet. Clearly, that's a concern because he may not understand what's being asked. So I just think it touches too closely on Miranda, and I don't think the jury needs to be involved in that at all. That was already litigated and decided, and Judge Fernandez decided that all these statements are admissible. They do come in, that he was not required to read a Miranda until he actually did. So I don't believe that bringing it out in the trial would serve any purpose. The record's been sufficiently preserved for the appellate purposes. After this trial, they clearly have it all laid out.
My only concern, Judge, is of course the jury instruction on statements. And again, I definitely want to limit it because I do not.
First, so approach the bench before you ask that
Very
question.
good. Thank you, Judge.
All right.
And if you could just address with the jury publicity,
Sure.
we would invoke the rule.
All right.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah. Right. Stay prepared to make an opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
The gun discharged. It was an accidental discharge. I was trying to take out the magazine and it went off. They was both in bed. I was in their room. Where was your wife? She was in her room. Those are the words, ladies and gentlemen, of that man seated right over there, Jermaine Bass. Those were the words he told those deputies when they arrived and found these children shot in the head. That was his explanation to them of why 2 children were shot in the head. Accident discharge. I was trying to take out the magazine and it went off. That was his explanation. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see this was no accident. This was not an accident. You're also going to hear, he will tell them where the gun is. In the dresser, upstairs, the silver dresser. You're going to hear him tell them, and sure enough, they go there, they find that gun, and ladies and gentlemen, that gun is the murder weapon. That is the gun that fired the bullets into Jayla Bass and killed her. And the evidence is going to show that. He told them right where that gun was, right next to his wallet. You will not only hear these things, you will see him say these things to the deputies when they arrive on scene. You're going to hear from some of the responding deputies that arrive. These deputies wear what are called body-worn cameras. These cameras capture interactions with citizens, interactions during events. They come on generally when they're responding to a scene. They're not on all the time, but they come on when they're responding to a scene. And these came on for some of these deputies. So you are going to see Jermaine Bass that night. You're going to hear his explanation to the deputies of how both his children ended up shot in the head. What you will not hear from him are any questions about how is his daughter doing? How is his son doing?
Objection. Improper argument. Sustained.
You will never hear him say it was anyone else other than it was an accidental discharge while I was taking out the magazine. That's what you will hear. But the evidence will show you, ladies and gentlemen, this was no accidental discharge. 5 shots from that Glock. 4 hit their target. 3 of them went into the head of Jayla Bass, his daughter, his 5-year-old daughter, as she lay in the bed right next to her brother, who was also shot in the head, in the temple. These were aimed, they were precise, they were targeted right to the most crucial part of the body, the head. 5 shots, 4 in the head. That's what the evidence is going to show you, ladies and gentlemen. On August 29th of 2022, this defendant right here walked into that bedroom where these 2 little children were laying in their bed, and he shot 5 times into their heads. Why this man would take the life of his 5-year-old daughter, Jayla Bass, and attempt to take the life of his 8-year-old son, Jermaine Bass, we may not know. We may never know. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, I told you during voir dire that we don't have to prove motive. But ladies and gentlemen, you will hear some evidence. You will hear some evidence that something was not right in the Bass household. Something was not going right there. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is going to show you that this house involved Jermaine Bass, who lived there with his wife, Shirley Bass, and their daughter, Jayla, and the son, Jermaine, as well. It might get a little confusing, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm going to probably call the son JJ. That's kind of the nickname they gave him, because both the son and father are both named Jermaine Bass, and there's no, like, junior or anything like that. So if you hear me from time to time use the word JJ, I'm referring to the son. All right? She's going to tell you that they were having a wonderful time. Shirley went, and they had dinner, and everyone was getting along very well. Jermaine was not there. He was supposed to be home taking care of the kids. But he was not home taking care of the kids. The evidence is going to show that he left those kids, drove all the way to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Basically followed Shirley Bass. Why? We don't know, ladies and gentlemen. But he did. The phone records will conclusively show that he left. We also have video of his Nissan truck pulling out and leaving that residence not long after Shirley leaves. You're going to hear from China that when they were driving away, as they were leaving Ruth's Chris, there was this truck behind her that was really driving aggressively and scaring her. She didn't know what was going on. It's tailgating her. So just as she's pulling onto the on-ramp to get on the interstate, this truck is right on her tail and she's scared. So she stops the car. This truck pulls around her and stops in front. And who gets out of that car? Jermaine Bass. Gets out of that car angry and goes up to the driver's door thinking that it would be his wife in the driver's seat, but it was China. So he looks at his wife and says, "Are you drunk?" He then goes back into his car and drives away. Don't know why that was, but it's clear, ladies and gentlemen, there was some problems going on in that household. There is evidence to show that there was something going on in that household. And Jermaine Bass, the defendant here, was not happy about it. So you're going to hear that they drive home. Shirley drops off China at her house, which she lived up in that same sort of area. And she goes home. And you're going to see video from an apartment complex. In this video is part of it shows the parking lot area in front of the residence where Shirley and Jermaine lived. And you're going to see the defendant pull in this big truck, park the truck, go inside. A few minutes later, you're going to see Shirley's car pull up. She's going to park the car, and then she goes in. Less than 8 minutes later, you're going to see Shirley Bass outside, looking for help, frantic. Shots had rang out. Just a few minutes from coming home from this dinner to celebrate her sister. Shots. Those are the shots that killed Jayla and seriously hurt Jake. You also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun in different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so. But on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun in different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so, but on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun at different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so, but on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun at different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so, but on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun at different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so, but on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun at different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's both or so, but on the grip / trigger, as well as on the base of the gun where the magazine is put in, they're able to obtain DNA. And the DNA does match, in fact, Jermaine Bass. But there's one other source of the DNA, and you're going to hear that it matches the son, JJ, the other Jermaine Bass. Now, I want you to listen to that expert, and she's going to testify to you, and she's also explain to you about transfer DNA and how that occurs. If you touch someone, and they're sweating, or their skin cells get on you, and then you touch an object, you can transfer that person's DNA. Any bodily fluid can transfer the DNA to that property. And you're going to hear from that DNA expert who's going to explain all that to you. You're also hear that the gun was swabbed. And what that means is they take like a solution or water and they rub it on the gun at different areas to determine whether they can pick up any DNA. And you're going to hear that on the grip, ladies and gentlemen, and trigger, it's combined, so we don't know if it's the owner of that gun wanted these deputies to believe this was an accident.
Objection, improper argument.
Overruled.
That is what he told them. In those initial moments when the deputies arrived, that's what he tells them. This was an accident. An accidental discharge of 5 rounds. This isn't a automatic gun where you hold it down and it just fires repeatedly. You're going to hear from the firearms expert, every single one of those 5 shots had to pull that trigger. Every single one. It's not that if you hold it down, it'll go off. You're going to hear from this firearms expert. This was no accident, ladies and gentlemen. Not even close. This was a deliberate, intentional, premeditated act to kill those 2 children. Done by that man right there, Jermaine Bass. The state has no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, the conclusion of the evidence in this case, that you will find the defendant guilty as charged of first-degree murder, guilty as charged of aggravated child abuse, 2 counts, and guilty as charged of attempted first-degree murder.
Morning.
Thank you.
Jermaine Bass, my client, did not shoot his children. What happened on August 29, 2022 was tragic, and you're going to hear a lot of testimony about what happened on that day. And a lot we are not going to be in dispute about with the state. Where it happened, what time it happened, how many shots were fired, things of that nature. You're going to see that there's not a lot that we're going to be disputing about. But the most important part, we are. Who was responsible? Who fired the gun that injured Jayla and JJ Bass? You're going to hear the evidence because, as the judge instructed you, what we say is not evidence. The evidence you're going to hear from the witness stand and from the exhibits in this case. And when you hear the evidence, pay close attention to the timeline of the events. When Shirley calls 911 and you're going to hear that call, she is not asking for police. She's asking for an ambulance. She's asking for medical help repeatedly, and you will hear it for yourself. Mr. Terry stood up here and said that he wants you to believe that it's an accident, but pay attention to what Shirley says as well about what happened. The 911 operator is continuously asking her, who fired the gun? Did somebody drive by? And pay attention to what her answers are close in time to the events. When police start their investigation, pay attention to who the police are able to talk to right away and who they have to wait to speak to. This story about Jermaine on the highway with China Gadsden and Shirley Bass doesn't come to police attention until over a year after the incident. Pay attention to who's cooperating. You'll hear from the lead detective in the case and the efforts that he made to speak to Jermaine, to JJ, and to speak to Shirley about what happened. You'll hear, obviously, that after this happened and JJ was injured, he was in the hospital for a while. And then they made efforts to speak to him once he was released. You'll hear from Detective Gabbard that Shirley was uncooperative when they tried to interview her son, that they were not able to investigate her phone because she never turned it over to law enforcement for them to look at any kind of communications that were happening that night. Shirley does not call 911 from her phone. She goes across, and the phone that she is using to dial 911 is Mr. Evans' phone, an across the street neighbor. Morning. Jermaine Bass, my client, did not shoot his children. What happened on August 29, 2022 was tragic, and you're going to hear a lot of testimony about what happened on that day. And a lot we are not going to be in dispute about with the state. Where it happened, what time it happened, how many shots were fired, things of that nature. You're going to see that there's not a lot that we're going to be disputing about. But the most important part, we are. Who was responsible? Who fired the gun that injured Jayla and JJ Bass? You're going to hear the evidence because, as the judge instructed you, what we say is not evidence. The evidence you're going to hear from the witness stand and from the exhibits in this case. And when you hear the evidence, pay close attention to the timeline of the events. When Shirley calls 911 and you're going to hear that call, she is not asking for police. She's asking for an ambulance. She's asking for medical help repeatedly, and you will hear it for yourself. Mr. Terry stood up here and said that he wants you to believe that it's
Detective, it's now 10 3310, we see an individual walk past. Did you ever identify who that individual was?
I did.
And who was that?
It was Shirley Bass.
And Corporal, while this is playing, where the individual you identified as Shirley Bass walked to, the individual known as Daquan Evans who called 911, does he live back in that location where she was walking towards?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
So guys, pay attention to her face as she's walking by and back again to check and see what's going on over at her house. I mean, is she afraid? I can't imagine that she would have left her children in that home if she were not afraid for her own safety. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think below.
And Corporal, we're at 10:34:06, and it appears she has something in her hand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's up to her ear. I said the phone.
Correct. It looks like she has it at one point, at some points out at her ear, and then at some points in her hand, and she's looking down at it.
So that's on August 31st, and then at some point, Shirley Bass will return to the hospital.
Correct.
Okay. And you then, as you've indicated, conduct a second interview with her that day.
That's correct.
Was anybody else present with you in the room as for the first interview? Anybody present?
In the first interview, present total was me, myself, Detective Vertu, as the law enforcement investigators, and then Shirley Bass and Marlene Gadsden in the room, in that family room within Tampa General Hospital.
And then for the second interview, who's present?
Present with me during the second interview was Detective Brunel, who was another detective in the homicide section at the time of the sheriff's office, and Shirley Bass, and then a CPI was in the interview the entire time. However, during the interview, at some point, for victim services, one of the victim specialists came in the room.
Okay. And that was pretty extensive as well, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, I have the third interview being the next day, September 1st of 2022. You have received the surveillance in this case, some of the surveillance we have looked at today, and you had some follow-up questions you wanted to ask Ms. Bass, correct?
That's correct.
All right. That's a shorter interview. That's brief.
Comparatively, yes.
Right, okay. During the course of this investigation, you found Shirley Bass difficult to reach on the phone if you tried to call her, correct?
At times, yes, she was very difficult to reach on the phone.
Okay. Now, the next contact I have for you, Corporal, is the execution of the search warrant that you got for Shirley's buccal swab. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I have that date as May 7th of 2023.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And at that time, you got the buccal swab from Ms. Bass pursuant to the court order, and you asked her more questions, and you spoke with her about DNA and things like that.
I don't recall the substance. I executed the search warrant. I don't recall much more from the conversation.
Okay.
Is that unreasonable to be hesitant about allowing your 8-year-old son to talk to law enforcement after he has experienced something this traumatic?
Okay.
Let me know your thoughts.
All right, so the search warrant that you got for Shirley's buccal is going to be similar to the same procedure you would use for a search warrant for Mr. Bass.
That's correct.
Okay. And you also indicated you submitted Jayla's known profile.
That's correct.
Right? And also when it came to JJ, the son, his buccal swab was also submitted to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
That's correct.
All right. Now, did you get a court order search warrant? Was it voluntary for JJ? How did you go about doing his?
At the time of my response to, attempts to get a JJ.
Judge, may we approach?
Yes?
You don't.
After that interview, the third attempt on September 12th, did the Sheriff's Department obtain an investigative subpoena and have it served on Shirley Bass?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Tell the jury what is an investigative subpoena.
An investigative subpoena is an order ultimately issued by the state attorney's office commanding a witness to be present for either an interview, typically for an interview, to provide testimony in relation to a case.
Is it voluntary, in other words? Can a person just say, I'm not going to appear?
No, it's not law.
Okay.
It sounds like the defense is just throwing anything at the wall to see if something will stick. I mean, they really don't have evidence to indicate the mom, Shirley, or the son, JJ, in my opinion. And quite honestly, I think it's kind of low to involve a child of 8 years old when you don't have anything to back it up.
All right, be seated. My understanding is you all have reached a verdict. Is that right?
Yes.
If you would hand the verdict form to the bailiff for me. Thank you. All right, the verdict form is in order. If you would publish the verdict and poll the jury, please.
Yes, ma'am. State of Florida versus Jermaine Lavonda Bass. Case number 22 CF 011717A. Trial Division 3. Verdict form. We the jury find as follows as to count 1, murder in the first degree. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree, Jayla Bass, as charged. And during the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use any weapon or firearm? Yes. Did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Yes. Did the defendant discharge the firearm? Yes. Did the discharge cause death of the victim? Yes. 12 of the 12 of us find the killing was premeditated murder. 12 of the 12 of us find the killing was premeditated murder and felony murder. We the jury find as follows as to count 2, aggravated child abuse. The defendant is guilty of aggravated child abuse as charged. We the jury find as follows as to count 3, aggravated child abuse. Jermaine J.J. Bass. The defendant is guilty of aggravated child abuse as charged. We the jury find as follows as to count 4, attempted murder in the first degree. Jermaine J.J. Bass. The defendant is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Jermaine J.J. Bass as charged. And during the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten, or attempt to use any weapon or firearm? Yes. Did the defendant actually possess a firearm? Yes. Did the defendant discharge the firearm? Yes. Did the discharge cause great bodily harm to the victim? Yes. So say we all, dated this 27th day of February, 2025, juror number 1, foreperson of the jury. Juror number 1, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yeah. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yeah. Juror number 3, are these your true and correct verdicts? Juror number 4, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 5, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 6, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 8, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 10, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 12, are these your true and correct verdicts? They are. Juror number 14, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Thank you. I can't see.
You missed one.
I can't.
I was 12.
You missed 11.
11, excuse me. Juror number 11, are these your true and correct verdicts? Thank you.
And juror number 12, are these your true and correct verdicts? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Well, there you have it, guys. Guilty on all charges. What do you think? Did the jury get this one right? Also, do you have any unanswered questions at this point? I have a few myself. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that's still unanswered in your mind. If you want to see more true crime videos without all the fluff and filler like this one, please hit that like button and leave a comment for me. It does help my videos show up in the algorithm for YouTube. All right, guys, I appreciate it if you watched this far, and maybe I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.